You mentioned a few things that I caught on to about the possible inevitability of some kind of partition of Ukraine, or the question of whether Ukraine could be forced into a ceasefire, whether they would agree or not. But from inside Ukraine, and I was in Donbass in the front lines just 2 weeks ago, the feeling is that if the West abandons Ukraine, then we're talking about the military of Ukraine losing its ability to still fight toe-to-toe with Russia, to the point where Russia could go forward and basically take as much of Ukraine as it wants. They tried to take Kyiv already, and we have no evidence that Putin's will and wish to take Kyiv and Odessa and almost all of Ukraine maybe has changed. So I'm interested in the context of you saying that the US or the West could accept the unacceptable. Doesn't that go down two very different trajectories depending on whether the front line is frozen somewhere where it is now, or we're talking about the complete capitulation of Ukraine? And if it's the second, then is that really possible for any kind of Western order to accept?
I want to be very clear with all of you, and especially with you, that when I say I think that Ukraine's partition is inevitable, I do not view that as in any way just or acceptable. It's not an acceptable outcome, but I think it's going to happen. And I, as a political scientist, it is incumbent on me not to lie to you with my analysis. You've probably seen all of the videos of Trump saying, "I'm going to end the war in one day." And what he means by that, of course, is he's going to demand that the Ukrainians accept the present territorial delineation and the illegal annexations by Russia of Ukrainian territory. And he had been saying that about Crimea, by the way, when he was president before. They said, well, why do we care about Crimea? It was Russia before. This is not new for him. And of course, the little green men occupied pieces of Ukraine for a decade now, and Europe was prepared to tolerate that, right? And still send heads of state to meet with Putin and everything else, do business with him, which the Ukrainians don't forget, of course, but we don't talk about as much in the West. But let's imagine that the Ukrainians are trying to find a way, because they know that the military is starting to have a really serious problem. I heard, that the average age of a Ukrainian soldier on the front lines now is 37. Like, that is not sustainable for years and years. It's not as if Trump is prepared to sit there and say, Russia can take all of Ukraine. And I think it is worth remembering that it was under Trump last time around that the javelins, which Obama refused to give Ukraine, Trump got that done. Now, that was mostly Trump's cabinet. It wasn't Trump himself. But Trump didn't try to stop it, frankly, until that perfect phone call he had with Zelensky when he wanted, the investigation of Biden. And I do think that if Putin, if Trump says, I want a ceasefire, and if Putin actually tried to send troops into Kiev, I think you might find that Trump finds that completely unacceptable, because that makes him look weak. And it's not clear to me that Trump or his advisors would accept that as an outcome, and they might be willing to take some fairly substantial risks against Russia directly in that environment. It's not like Putin is actually his best friend. Again, that's a narrative. But and Trump has no problem with authoritarian leaders, but he wants to do deals with them. He doesn't like authoritarian leaders that make him look stupid. That's a different story. So I think that there's a massive amount of uncertainty for Ukraine. I will also say that I've spoken with a lot of military experts in the United States and in NATO that are focusing on what the Ukrainians should be able to do, even if the Americans aren't able to provide much more support. Few of them believe that Kyiv falls. Now, Odessa is a different story, but few of them think that this is actually Ukraine falling under the present Russian capabilities in the next year or 2 years. They'd have to mobilize much more. Defense still matters a lot more, that kind of thing. So I'm not a military expert, but I would still see that as a relatively tail risk environment, not one the Ukrainians should be comfortable with, but not one that should be your headline.